So our first question is from blogger Chris Demaro from Gas 2.0. And he would like to know how Ford plans to promote sustainability in racing. Might we see an E85 capable 5-liter V8 in the Mustang GT down the road? He'd really like to hear about this as he likes his muscle cars as much as he is a fan of alternative fuels.
So that is a good question. I can't say that we have something specific going on right now, but we do have our racing team, has contacted us because there's been other interest in terms of the, sustainable racing. So we're just starting to engage in conversations of, what would that look like if it's from a maybe EcoBoost versions of high performance vehicles to using ethanol. So there is another concept of, from a sustainable standpoint in racing, can we be using ethanol, and how would that look? So that's another element to just kind of pure electric. So we're starting to have those conversations. Nothing to really talk specifically about right now, but it's good to hear that there's others on the outside that are also interested in sustainability in racing. So thank you.
Great. Now we've got some questions from some of our Facebook fans. The first is from Kevin Robinson, and he asks, any chance we'll get more super fuel efficient cars in the U.S. soon, especially ones made here?
Yeah, so we actually that's a very good question. We actually have one of our Fiestas is a super fuel efficient Fiesta that gets 40 miles per gallon. So one of the real keys here is that we really want to, in Europe, there's actually been a demand for these super fuel efficient vehicles for quite a while right now. And in Europe, we actually have products that we label Econetic. So you have the Econetic version of different vehicles because customers are they've been asking over there for exactly that. What are the super fuel efficient versions that we could offer here? So we've done that with the Fiesta. I think that trend now is just going to continue with some of our other products. So you should be seeing that coming.
Chris Hilger asks, with fuel prices greatly swinging over the past 2 years, what baseline price for fuel does Ford use to develop its future portfolio?
Yeah, great question, Chris. So that's one of the $1 million questions that gets asked right within the four walls of Ford. It's that, who has the best guess on, where fuel prices are going to go? I guess one of the things that we determine that no matter what we guess, the one thing that's going to be assured is that we're going to guess wrong. Not only are we going to guess wrong in terms of where fuel prices are going, but we'll probably guess wrong in terms of how customers are going to react to the fuel prices. We think, typically they're going to want more fuel efficiency, smaller vehicles. But we didn't want to get into a game that, as you see these wild swings in fuel prices, in many cases based upon the external environment and the problem areas of the world, that we're always adjusting what vehicles designed to. So what we've done instead is, so we have this full portfolio of vehicles that are highly fuel efficient. What we've decided to do is to make sure that we have flexibility in our manufacturing so that regardless of where fuel prices go, if we have flexibility in our manufacturing, I can mix manage very quickly from one size vehicle to another. So that's how we're addressing it, not trying to look into a crystal ball and saying, all right, what if gas prices go to $5, what does it mean? We're going to be a full-line manufacturer. We're going to have flexibility in our manufacturing. It's going to allow us to switch from one vehicle to another vehicle quickly based upon where fuel prices go and what customers are demanding.
Great. Next question is from Casey Popliars. We all know that you can achieve much higher MPG than what you are producing. Why not make a V8 that can get 30 miles per gallon?
That's Casey. Thank you for the question. I'll tell you, I know that we do get that question often that, hey, are you guys holding back on anything? And, the bottom line is we're really not holding back on anything because obviously, as I mentioned, the reason we want to be leadership in fuel economy in every segment that we serve in is because customers value that, they're willing to pay for that. So it only makes sense, wow, if we could produce more fuel efficient vehicles, we would do it, or a higher level of fuel efficiency. So we're always looking at doing that. I think the challenge that we have out there, because you might hear, hey, some guy in his garage was able to jack up their fuel economy on their V8 to some ungodly number, and that's fantastic. We're always interested in better fuel economy. Our challenge is always the trade-off, right? So as you have better fuel economy, let's say with a V8 or with another engine, are there any takeaways, right? I mean, are you reducing your amount of power? Are there increased amount of emissions? Is from an NVH, which is, a vibration standpoint, are there problems? So that's typically what our holdback is trying to say, not degrade any of those other areas while we try to improve the fuel economy. But I'll tell you, right, if we are so looking for fuel economy improvements that there is no holding back. It's just a matter of making sure the customer isn't compromised in the other attributes of that product.
Great. Next question is from Scott McGuire. He asks, would it be possible to make an EcoBoost V8?
Yeah, I think technically it would be possible to make an EcoBoost V8, right? It's just direct injection and turbocharging. So there's nothing technically that prevents us from doing that. Again, as an approach standpoint, what we look at, from a company perspective is, what is the market that's out there that's going to demand, let's say, that type of a product. And once we get enough input that says, hey, there is a market out there, it doesn't have to even be huge, right? It could be a niche market. If there is a market out there, if we're getting signals that type of product makes sense, we're always interested in understanding how we could deliver a product like that. So again, it's these types of inputs, which is just another data source to say what are the areas we should be thinking about that we're not playing in right now. But outside of that, nothing to announce.
Great. Ellen Allison asks, why does America not have diesel models?
Alan, okay, very good question. And I know when I go over to Europe and I talk to my European colleagues at Ford, they say, how come you don't have diesel models in the U.S.? Because diesel it's a great technology. Alan, you've probably driven diesel cars. I've driven them in Europe. They're phenomenal. A couple of challenges here in the U.S. with regard to diesel. Number one, and I'm gonna contrast it to Europe. Europe, number one, their diesel prices, the prices for diesel at the pump are less than gasoline. So basically they provide incentives the governments provide incentives to buy diesel over gasoline. So diesel is cheaper. And with gas and diesel prices, but gas prices in particular, petrol prices in Europe being so high, people are very interested. And again, they're buying with their pocketbook that, man, if I could use a fuel that costs less and gets better fuel economy, I'm going to buy that particular fuel. So big demand for the diesels over in Europe because of that. The diesel vehicles do cost more, but the customers do see that payback. The challenge we have in the U.S. is that in most places throughout the U.S., diesel prices for the fuel is more than gasoline. So you have this conundrum of the diesel vehicles are going to be more expensive, like they are in Europe. But now your payback, even though the fuel economy is better of a diesel versus a gasoline, because the diesel prices are higher, your payback is taking longer. And I think the American psyche, and probably just any consumer psyche, it's difficult if they're not going to do the calculation, geez, I'm going to buy this product that costs more money, and I have to buy a fuel that costs me more money, right? And if they've done the math, the payback will get there, but it's going to be much longer term than Europe. The other challenge that we have with diesel, just kind of taking a look forward, vehicles, as everybody knows, have to meet emission requirements too. And when we look at the future emission requirements, particularly in the U.S., as it relates to allowable emissions, the diesel vehicles are going to be very challenged, particularly the smaller vehicles. The larger vehicles, we're going to get there, but the smaller vehicles are really going to be challenged in terms of being able to deliver to those levels. And the only way to deliver those levels is to put more cost into the products. And so that's going to make it an affordability challenge.
Great. Next question is from Brent Buell. And he asks, is an EcoBoost in the Mustang's future?
So unfortunately, my role here is I cannot talk about future product plans. So I can't comment on that. All I can say is the whole EcoBoost concept and approach is something that we're blowing across as many product lines as possible. So we're considering everything.
Great. Scott Weinberg asks, is there any chance of a performance hybrid in Ford's future? I believe the Mustang V6 paired with hybrid tech could make for a mean over 40 mile per gallon machine. Okay,
so that's like another question in terms of the EcoBoost in the Mustang. So again, I can't comment on our future product plans. But again, it really comes down to every question that's being asked here. Sure, there's discussions like that go on at Ford all the time. What are the various options we could offer or configurations we could offer that we don't currently offer, right? It's all about how do we appeal to a larger marketplace. So can't announce anything right now, but all these concepts that are being talked about, as we get a critical mass, as we're getting more and more input that a performance version of a hybrid makes sense, or an EcoBoost version of another of a V8 makes sense, right? Those are examples. As we get more and more input, then we start to say, hey, there could be a market out there that's worth going after. So we'll always be considering these types of options, but nothing to report right now.
Great. Landon Eastley asks, how can I get better mileage out of my 2005 Mustang V6? Gas is over $4 a gallon. Our budgets cannot afford that for a long period of time. Help.
Okay, so that's a lot of people ask the question around, how they could get better gas. And I'm not just going to talk about the Mustang itself, but just any vehicle. A lot of folks have, when I talk to them and I say, hey, you want to buy this great fuel efficient vehicle, they say, I can't afford a new vehicle right now. Can't you give me any tips on how I could get more fuel efficiency out of my current vehicle? And actually, there are a lot of tips. We've actually published on our website eco driving techniques. So these are techniques that if you stop and think about them, you're like, yeah. I mean, those will get me better fuel economy, but they really do. So it's things like, having your windows rolled up if you're traveling over 50 miles an hour on the highway. You actually get better fuel economy going that route and having your air conditioning on versus having the windows down. That's a good example. Simple things like checking your tires. I know it seems, mundane, but, checking your tires, engine tune-ups, all of those elements, I'll tell you, really add to fuel economy improvements. Taking all that, stuff that you might have in your trunk out of your trunk, if you're not needing it, again, reducing the weight. All these elements, you could see upwards 20-25% improvement with the eco-driving techniques that we've outlined. I didn't believe it just in terms of driving styles. I went on a course and they told me, you get 20% better fuel economy improvement. I said, yeah, no way. I know how to drive a vehicle. And I'll tell you what, we went through this course in terms of, just being very conscious of when you're accelerating and decelerating, coming up to stoplights, stop signs, that type of thing. And I got something like a 19% fuel economy improvement. So these tips are real. They could be used on any vehicle that you own right now. So I encourage people to go to our website with those eco-driving tips.
Great. Next question is from Gary Zavitz. He asks, in light of the Focus electric launch this year, what is Ford's 5-year vision for gas hybrid electric vehicles? Equal development on all three, or is hybrid a bridging strategy to go fully electric?
So that's an interesting question. If first of all, we're going to be focused on delivering hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and battery electrics. Probably a larger percentage of hybrids versus the other two, because again, it just kind of gets back to the customer demand. But you have an interesting question in there. And when we talk about our electrified portfolio, I mentioned hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and battery electrics. And the reason I mention that is a lot of the technologies that are part of the electrified pieces of the hybrid, we could actually use for the plug-ins and the battery electrics. If it's the transaxles, if it's some of the battery technology, a lot of the electrical components span across really all three types of electrified vehicles. So the more volume we get, even in our hybrids, that's only going to improve our cost situation on plug-ins and battery electrics. It is our strategy is to really optimize that technology that really covers all three areas of electrified vehicles.
Next question is from Mark Small out of the UK, actually. He asks, why do Americans still want huge engine sizes? For example, why would you need a 3-liter V6 and a Fusion? A 2-liter is sufficient enough for a car that size. And I won't even start on the V8 pickup engines. We manage well with 3-liter inline 4 diesels here in the UK.
Yeah, so great question, Mark, and I know my European colleagues ask me the same question. Why do we need everything so much bigger all the time, right? What's the deal with that, particularly with engines? I think that mindset is shifting. I would say 5-6 years ago, maybe even sooner than that. It was all about, and I mentioned in the beginning of my talk, the fact that when we had powertrain improvements, we just kind of plowed them into more horsepower, more cylinders, because there was like this insatiable appetite for that in the U.S. It was driven by the fact that, unlike in England, our fuel prices were cheap, right? Energy was cheap, so buying gas didn't cost you anything. I might as well get the bigger version, the more horsepower version. So that kind of fed that mindset. What we're seeing now, particularly with the way gas prices are going, people are saying, you know something, I think I kind of have, this is the majority of the population now, I think I kind of have adequate performance. So yeah, I don't need more horsepower, more cylinders. What I really need is better fuel economy because I'm tired of spending a ton of money at the gas pump right now. So I think, Mark, what you're seeing is a shift. You know, it hasn't completely changed yet, but a shift in terms of the mindset of the American consumer to be more like the European consumers and not necessarily needing more in terms of their powertrains.
Great. Carl Warmington asks, why are the active shutters not standard features on all new 2012 Focus?
So good question, Carl. You're familiar with the active shutters. Something that we do oftentimes at Ford is when we have a new technology, if it's active shutters, I mentioned electric power assisted steering, we'll start out by having it on one version of one model and then get some experience with it and then understand how we could proliferate that into the other models. So it's more from an approach standpoint, right? We didn't necessarily, in our approach, wouldn't it be to come out with active shutters on every vehicle that we have right when active shutters are available, or come out with electric power assisted steering on every vehicle we have once it became available. We want to get some experience with it, number one. But secondly, we have to get those parts from suppliers. And suppliers don't always have a great ability of going from nothing to millions of vehicles all at once. So I would say that this is our first step. And as we see it become effective, we could potentially see it being expanded into other products.
Great. Now we'll move on to some of the questions that have come in from the live stream from those of you watching. We have a couple here from Meow. The first one is, how are you incorporating LG into future plans for alternative fuel options, if at all?
So that's we're getting more into the research side. So one of the pieces to our portfolio that I didn't mention is that we do offer vehicles that run on ethanol, so flex fuel vehicles as we call them, and also biodiesel. And our new diesel engine in our Super Duty actually can accommodate up to 20% biodiesel or B20. And when we think about what could make up biodiesel, it could be vegetable oils or it could be, let's say, feedstock like from algae. So right now, with regard to algae, we have our scientists in our lab really trying to understand and working with universities, what are the prospects for algae? They look to be promising, but we need to go from a promising concept to be able to commercialize it and make it affordable. And I think we're kind of in that transition stage. But the real cool thing is when you think about algae, right? I mean, algae takes CO2 out of the air, and it can be used as a feedstock for fuel. So lots of promise, I think, globally on algae as a fuel source. And just stay tuned. I think it's going to be a player in the future.
Right. The second thing that Meow would like to know is if you could expand a little more on Ford's announcement of plug-in hybrid and the benefits of using it.
So our announcement of a plug-in hybrid. So for some customers, as I mentioned, the plug-in hybrid is, think about a hybrid that you plug in. It's not going to have the same full range as a pure battery electric. So it's going to go, a certain number of miles, 20, 30 miles, depending on your driving style, maybe a little bit more. And so the benefits are, if you're a customer that 95% of the time or 90% of the time, you could kind of pick the percentage, that really is only going to be going that distance. The advantage you have with a plug-in hybrid is that the energy that you're using is off the battery during that period. So because electricity is a lot cheaper than gasoline, for you as a customer, that would be a very good vehicle because you're not actually using the engine all that often. So that's the benefit of a plug-in. It really gets back to what is the application that you have as a customer, and if your application is, I only occasionally need kind of the gasoline part of my vehicle because most of the time I'm just going to be driving a short number of miles, then a plug-in makes perfect sense for you.
Next question is from Colby Green. Going forward, how will Ford tackle range anxiety issues with electric cars? Or is range anxiety merely just a marketing ploy?
No, I think, customers, it depends, right? Depending on, some customers are going to drive much less than the range that's going to be provided in an electric vehicle. So they're not going to have any range anxiety. Others are going to, be a little bit more anxious because they're used to being able to, if they do run out of fuel, fill up within 2 minutes. I think one of the ways that we at Ford are really going to try to address range anxiety is to make sure that our information system in the vehicle is to a point where customers know all the time, again, how much range they're actually going to have. And the cool thing about our product when it comes out, depending on how you're driving, it's going to be able to tell you what range you actually have remaining. That's number one. Secondly, we're really looking to partner with some information organizations that are going to have availability of electric charging stations. So if you're out, you're going to want to know, whoa, where are the electric charging stations? Is there anybody at those stations? How far are they? Am I going to be able to get to those stations? Having that information in a vehicle will also help out to minimize that range anxiety.
A couple questions here from Live Eco.